evening and welcome to Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. Tonight, we bring you compelling updates on the ongoing struggle for freedom and justice in Ambazonia. As the colonial regime intensifies its aggressions towards against the Ambazonian state army and its efforts to undermine the resilience of Ambazonian institutions and the valiant Ambazonian state army, we see Ambazonians standing united in exposing the colonial regime's overreach, deception, and futile attempts to destabilize the liberation movement. The colonial government's strategies, from infiltrating traditional leaderships to manipulating religious institutions, it reveals their desperation to suppress the unyielding spirit of the Amazonian people. Their reliance on puppets and diversionary tactics aims to sow division within Amazonian ranks, yet it only serves to strengthen the Ambazonian resolve. Across Ambazonia, the brave ASA Ambazonian State Army fighters have demonstrated unmatched vigilance and strength, thwarting colonial plans and reaffirming their commitment to defending the sovereignty of Ambazonia. In Ngoketunja County, we get to see an exposure of betrayal of a so-called leader who, instead of safeguarding his people, has chosen to collude with the enemy. In Buyaswell and Mezam counties, we see the Ambazonian State Army continuing to deliver decisive blows to the occupying forces, the forces of occupation, dismantling illegal checkpoints and disrupting their oppressive operations. Well, as we highlight these developments tonight, we are reminded that Ambazonia's journey towards liberation is paved with resilience, sacrifice, and an unwavering belief in the right to self-determination. The colonial regime's attempts to impose their rule and distort the reality will not succeed, for the truth of the struggle echoes louder than their propaganda. Well, stay tuned for an in-depth analysis of these critical events and more as we shine a light on the bravery of the Ambazonian people and the current path towards a free and sovereign Ambazonia. Well, these are the prime headlines for Undaunted tonight. We see Tamfu Richard's torture, La Republic human rights abuses. We'll shine a light on that. Imposing leadership in Ambazonia, not just traditional leadership, but now religious institutions. We also see the Ambazonian State Army standing firm against colonial provocations and infiltration, as well as on the African scene where Biden's last-minute move, we see the implications for Angola and Africa. And the United Nations Syria Commission of Inquiry has warned that fighting has intensified along multiple front lines of the Syrian conflict. Let's head on into the full briefings of Undaunted tonight. While the brutal assault of lawyer Tamfu Richard by colonial forces serves as a glaring reminder of the systemic violence and repression faced by Ambazonians under La République du Cameroon, while the arrest of the gendarmes responsible for Tamfu's torture is being celebrated by some as a step towards justice, many Ambazonians view it as a calculated distraction from the regime's entrenched history of human rights violation. Well, this incident not only exemplifies the daily struggles of British Southern Cameroons, but also underscores the global attention shifting towards the plight of Ambazonia amidst heightened scrutiny by the international organizations. Well, on Friday, November 29, 2024, lawyer Tamfu Richard was violently assaulted by gendarmes while fulfilling his professional duties of defending a client. The incident, captured on video, showed Tamfu being stomped on and humiliated, an act emblematic of the broader brutality meted out to Ambazonians by La Republic forces. The video's widespread circulation ignited public outrage and brought renewed focus to the systemic abuses occurring in Ambazonia. Under intense scrutiny from the United Nations Committee Against Torture and mounting international pressure, La Republic authorities announced the arrest of the gendarmes involved. However, Ambazonian analysts and human rights advocates have seen this clearly as a tactical move to divert attention rather than to genuine pursue justice. Well, this is nothing but a facade, said one Ambazonian observer. The La Republic's pattern of repression, torture, and an extrajudicial killings cannot be erased with one token gesture to blind the eyes of the international community. But Human Rights Watch and other organizations have long documented the regime's atrocities, particularly against Amazonian civilians and activists, from indiscriminate killings and arbitrary arrests to torture in detention centers. La Republic colonial forces have shown a blatant disregard for human dignity. The assault on Tamfu Richard is yet another example of the targeted violence faced by British Southern Cameroonians who dare to demand justice and their basic rights. While the timing of the arrest, coming just days after the United Nations Committee Against Torture raised concerns about La Republic's human rights record, it further fuels skepticism. While many believe that move is an attempt to deflect international condemnation and maintain an illusion of accountability. This is not the first time La Republic has made symbolic arrests without addressing the root causes of these abuses. Another Ambazonian legal expert had this to say. Now, the assault on Tamfu underscores the urgent need for Ambazonians to resist and reject the colonial domination of their homeland. Lawyer Tamfu, a figure representing justice, was attacked not for any crime, but for his role in defending the rights of his fellow Ambazonians. This incident is a stark reminder that no Ambazonia is safe under the yoke of La Republic's oppressive regime. Ambazonians continue to call for the full independence of their homeland, the restoration of their independence, and the dismantling of the colonial structures that perpetuate violence and subjugation. The struggle is not just about physical liberation, but also about reclaiming the dignity and humanity that has been stripped away by decades of occupation. Now, while the arrest of the gendarmes involved in Tamfu's torture may appear to the international community as a step towards accountability, the Ambazonian community views it as yet another empty gesture by La Republic. The systemic nature of these abuses, coupled with the regime's history of symbolic actions under international pressure, it leaves little hope for genuine reform. As Ambazonians continue to fight for their freedom, the global communities urge to hold La Republic accountable for its actions. Justice for Tamfu Richard is not just about prosecuting individual perpetrators, but addressing the deeper systemic injustices inflicted on the people of Ambazonia. Well, before we head on to the next topic of concern, we have it with us in the studio, Barrister Mbeseha. Good evening, Barrister.
Yeah, good evening to you all. I'm happy to have me here again.
It's always a pleasure. Once again, you're welcome to Undaunted. Looking at the report we just had talking about the case of Tamfu, something that spread across social media of how barbaric the act was. Well, nothing unusual, but then yet another barbaric actions by the colonial forces of occupation. And now this action, something that a lot of people might not have anticipated if not for the pressures from the international community and Human Rights Watch. What would be your thoughts about this whole scenario?
Yeah, I think the arrest and assault was not just an arrest, they included assault on Barrister Tamfu. who ended up in the hospital in Douala is significant for a number of reasons. First, Barrister Tamfu is based in Douala. Douala is not part of Ambazonia, but he's an Ambazonian practicing there. And we have to remember that in Douala, for those who don't know, there are about hundreds and hundreds of lawyers in Douala. And only Tamfu was arrested. Why? Tamfu was not arrested and assaulted because he committed any crime. No. He was arrested and assaulted because he wanted to enforce the law. They enforced their own law because they were trying to arrest his client without a warrant. So he was just enforcing the law. He had done nothing wrong as an individual. And then I say he's doing this in Douala. In Douala, there are thousands of gendarmes, gendarme individuals committing these illegalities by day. There are hundreds of lawyers in Douala, francophones in general, witnessing these things every day. But none of them would dare to go out to challenge the gendarmes for what they were doing. But Tamfu was trying to enforce the Criminal Procedure Code, which is the Cameroon law. I got into all this assault and beating because even in the heart of all the illegalities, Honor and Ambazonian will stand up to challenge the illegalities going on there. It is because an Ambazonian that he stood up. He studied the common law of his same time there in his week. He studied the common law. He's a common law practitioner, though he found himself in Douala. But even though in Douala, the law they were trying to enforce is Cameroon law. Why are they not enforcing their laws? Why is it that the agents trying to enforce their own laws are assaulted a lot? The first thing we have to learn from as Ambazonians is that in the midst of all the illegalities in the so-called Cameroon, only an Ambazonian can stand up to the challenge. To challenge the status quo. That's what Tamfu was doing. In the heart of Douala. Remember, Douala is the largest city in Cameroon. It is the economic capital. So all these extortions, abductions are in Douala every day, every night. And the hundreds of lawyers have said right there, Honor and Ambazonian were there to do it. And of course, he was assaulted, he was locked up, or what all of us know. But again, we remember that it was happening just about a week after the focus on Geneva. What was Geneva about? Geneva was putting Cameroon on the spotlight of torture, which is signed up to the Torture Convention. They put them on the spotlight, on the spotlight in Geneva, and they were on the defense, claiming that in their security forces, everything is legal. And so shortly, a week after Geneva, this is happening to their own law enforcement officers. Law enforcement upon law enforcement. A lawyer is a law enforcement officer. Be sure the law applies. A gendarme is supposed to be a law enforcement officer. And so you find this spotlight after Geneva, putting them on the spotlight once more. And of course, as usual, as they told the lies in Geneva, they went down to practice the lies again. What did they do? They said, we just arrested the gendarmes. Is the arrest of a gendarme anything new in Cameroon? Probably not. But before we even go there, let us look back again. They assaulted Tamfu alone. What happened in 2016, the beginning of this so-called war? It was the assault on lawyers in Boer. They assaulted them collectively as a group. Nobody has ever apologized for that. They took their wigs and robes. Some of them, they kept them. Some of them have not recovered theirs. And so you find them here now doing exactly the same thing. Once they realize that they are uncovered because it's done in public, what do? They manufacture an excuse by telling us, well, we've arrested the gendarmes in detention. Of course, what is new there? What's the difference between the gendarmes arrested today, in the case of Tamfu, and the one that was supposed to have been arrested who killed people in Garibu? What's the difference between that one and then the gendarmes who were supposed to be, the people who were supposed to be put on trial during when they killed this lady, the warders? So the people in Cameroon is a very wicked regime. They commit those crimes in anticipation And then they know that there will be spotlight on them. Then they manufacture evidence to exculpate themselves. It's not enough to arrest the lawyers, to arrest the criminals. But arresting three gendarmes who were in the truck to go arrest this guy is not enough. The people who gave the orders are still sitting there. We've not heard them that they arrested the colonial gendarme commander who signed the arrest warrant in the first place. They didn't just go out signing the papers themselves. Their bosses signed them. And they knew that they were doing an illegal thing. So why is they need arresting a foot soldier, those 3-4 gendarmes, and leaving the people who give the orders? Its pretentiousness is just attempt to fool the world. It's a deceit. And so it's a stark reminder to us, Ambazonians, that this is not where we should be. Tamfu better have been in Boya, Bamanda, or somewhere else in Ambazonia. If he happened to have been there, and these things did happen there, the law will follow its course. They will not just be arrested, they will be tried. Tamfu will be compensated for the injuries he suffered from. All these things are far from ever being reached because Yaoundé is a criminal junta. These things are not unplanned. In fact, I don't even imagine anything Camus is illegal. They were in Geneva defending their detention and so on. Nobody defended what I've called here all the time, Kale, which is a mass arrest of people without warrant. And so it's not where we're supposed to be. Sorry for Mr. Tamfu. We hope he recovers. But even if he recovers and they compensate him with £1 million, 5 million, whatever amount, that is not going to replace the humiliation they imposed on this young man as a lawyer. The humiliation remains on him. He's borne the pains for which he was not supposed to. And so any other thing happening after that, as the minister said, oh, we're opening an investigation. To investigate what? Investigate that he was caught? He was not open there. What do they call in French? Flagrant delicto. They were caught red-handed. So what are you going to investigate? They are creating a commission to investigate what? That Tamfu was beaten? Everybody, the videos are there. That woman stood there crying, oh, let go this young man. The videos are all there. So what other things are you going to investigate? The paper that this gender went out to enforce is signed by somebody, signature is there. What other investigation do they need? So this is what they call flagrant delicto. Caught red-handed committing a crime. It doesn't require much to get the evidence. And so all what they are doing thereafter is a machination. And again, it's a reminder to all Ambazonians, mostly those who live in Douala, Yaoundé, and other francophone zones, to know that there's nowhere you belong. Legally, you don't belong there. Culturally, you don't belong there. Nationally, you don't belong there. If you were there as visitors from a different country, your embassies will be able to protect you. Over to you. Over to you.
All right, Bryce and Mbeseha, thank you for that wonderful contribution. But then we get to see that La Republique and its colonial forces, they not only usurp this power and abuse it, they seem to want to take control of every aspect of Ambazonia, and in yet another brazen attempt to control every facet of life. So to put in Ambazonia, the colonial government of La République du Cameroon continues its pattern of imposing leaders, this time not just on traditions, but on institutions that should operate autonomously. This time the target, the religious sector, where the so-called Minister of Territorial Administration, Atanga Nji, unilaterally installed leadership in the true Church of God. This act of overreach mirrors the regime's ongoing efforts to infiltrate and control Ambazonian traditions by appointing colonial backed traditional rulers, and these maneuvers designed to sow division and erode the fabric of Amazonian society only reaffirms the people's quest for complete liberation from colonial domination. The Colonial Administrative Court of Yaoundé has dealt a blow to Minister Atanga Nji's authoritarian attempt to dictate leadership Within the true Church of God, after months of deliberation, the court ruled in favor of Pastor Chana Landry as the rightful leader, effectively nullifying Atanga Inji's letter that had backed a self-imposed pastor, Abate Francois. Well, the minister's interference led to deep divisions within the church, with worshippers decrying the chaos that his letter had caused. Backed by MINAT, the Ministry of Territorial Administration, Frontier's leadership sparked internal discord mirroring the divisionary tactics used by the colonial regime in Ambazonian traditional institutions, similar to it. For decades, the colonial government has invested heavily in undermining Ambazonian traditions, appointing stooges as traditional rulers to serve their interest rather than the will of the people. This approach has not only disrupted the cultural and social balance of Ambazonia, but also demonstrated La Republic's contempt for the autonomy of the institutions that define the Ambazonian way of life. Now, this latest church debacle is a glaring example of the colonial government's selective application for enough laws designed solely to consolidate power and perpetuate subjugation. While the Yaoundé court's decision to revoke the minister's letter may appear as a correction of a legal misstep, it also highlights the incompetence and arbitrary nature of La Republique's governance. How can a minister not understand the very laws that he is purporting to enforce? Atanga Nji's actions are not surprising to Ambazonians, given his infamous dismissal of, in his words, Anglophone crisis as non-existent, a claim that has since been debunked by years of bloodshed, marginalization, and the relentless resistance of Ambazonians. Well, his attempt to infiltrate the church serves as yet another reminder that no institution in Ambazonia is safe from colonial meddling. Well, this interference is not about governance or order, but about maintaining control through division. Just as colonial authorities have appointed loyalists as traditional rulers to destabilize Ambazonian communities, they now seek to do the same things within churches, which remains a cornerstone of societal unity in the territory. While Ambazonians must see this for what it is, a desperate attempt by a failing colonial regime to tighten its grip on a people resolute in their fight for freedom. The court's ruling, though favorable in this instance, does not change the systemic problem. The colonial regime's handpicked courts and officials are not allies of justice but tools of oppression that occasionally correct superficial errors to maintain the illusion of fairness. The incident reinforces the need for Ambazonians to continue the fight for self-determination. Only by reclaiming sovereignty can the people of Ambazonia ensure that their institutions, be they cultural, religious, or political, are free from colonial interference and align with the will of the people. The colonial regime's overreach into the true Church of God is indeed a microcosm of its broader strategy to destabilize and control Ambazonia. And we could say the court's decision is a temporary reprieve, and it does not address the deeper issues of La Republique's illegal occupation and systemic oppression. Ambazonians remain steadfast in their pursuit of liberation, knowing that only a free Ambazonia can protect its traditions, institutions, and identity from the grasp of colonial domination. Barrister Mbeseha, this is another example from traditional rulers' imposition by the colonial government to churches. What do you have to say about this, Barrister Mbeseha?
Well, I think the history of churches, especially in Ambazonia, is peculiar. And what is going on now through Cameroon is disaster. We hear of churches, those of us who have attained some age, we'll go back, our mind go back to what we call traditional churches. In this sense, you have the Catholics, the Protestants, the Baptists, those churches that predated independence, that preach morality, that are still there doing a lot of work. They carry a large following. The Catholics are so large, the Presbyterians are so large, the Baptists are so large. You find them with hospitals, schools, and so on and so forth. So they are part of the development. But what is interesting is how government tries to infiltrate them. But before I get to the infiltration, then there comes another set of churches. These are very few mega churches we call today. Because by Cameroon law, those churches, the one like we call what do you call it? True Church of God. They have to register with MINAT, with the Minister of Territorial Administration. That's where Atangaji finds his feet. And because they are a church, they're supposed to have followers. Atangaji seeks to get the followers to support a political cause by imposing a leader of your own choice. But in this instant case, they failed because they lost the case in court. But that's not the end of their journey. They continue to infiltrate the church. In fact, they continue to infiltrate churches as we speak, including the traditional ones that I have mentioned earlier. Maybe we don't know. Not long ago at Tanganji, went somewhere in Yaoundé and built a whole church, a Catholic church, put up the building for the people and say, okay, I'll give you a church, to cajole the people to follow them. In addition to that, we are aware how the church is infiltrated today by the administration. The case of Reverend Funky is just an example. The case of Archbishop Andrew Kia is just an example. But with these other traditional churches that we know, Presbyterian Baptist, they have such a large following that a leader, call it Funky, call it Andrew, does not command overall structure in the church. There's sort of disagreement. That's why even with the infiltration, you find Bishop Cleda, Archbishop Cleda of Douala, disagreeing with Andrew. Even in his own diocesan area, which includes 4 or 5 other bishops, Bishop Kumbo, the Bishop of Manfe, the Bishop of Kumba, the Bishop of Goya. This form the area of Bamenda. These bishops, they don't agree with the political views of Andrew, so it's not easy to infiltrate them. It's not easy to infiltrate them. They will try to do it. Whoever is the bishop there, Archbishop, be Andrew, somebody who comes after him, might be infiltrated by the government. And they do it in several ways. One of the ways you know is you buy your car from Yaoundé and call it a presidential gift. To build your church, like Tangaji did somewhere else. In Yaoundé there, and say, okay, we'll give you a church to worship in. What is the church? A building. People come together to worship. But putting up the physical building might be challenging. They don't have the money. And so when you build that type of thing, you earn their confidence. You can tell us, okay, vote this one, you vote that way. That is what the problem is. But it is for the churches in collective terms to stand up to the morality. The church is the voice of the voiceless. It should be able to desist and resist corruption from politicians because that's not new. What they are doing in Cameroon, what Tangaji is doing is not new. It's all over Africa, in most countries in Africa. The political authorities will try to infiltrate the church by getting the leadership in support of their causes. And so, because if the bishop speaks, if Reverend Funky is retired now, whoever is sitting in his place speaks, there's a large following of people who just accept because the moderator has spoken, who just accept because the bishop has spoken, or the priest, or whoever might be in leadership. And so it's left for the church to assert their independence, to assert their role as a moral foundation of the community, to resist that thing by themselves or by taking court actions as might be in this case. And I will not end this without looking at what I said. It is universal. In Kenya, for example, the Catholic Church has been so infiltrated in like manner. They build churches, they build priest houses, they give money to corrupt the church. But that did not go unnoticed. That did not go unnoticed because I have here a letter that was written from the Archdiocese of Nairobi Catholic Church on the 18th of November 2024, in which case the Archbishop was telling all the bishops at the diocese of Nairobi, the Archdiocese of Nairobi, That is unacceptable. All gifts, cars, churches built by politicians in the name of the church, they have to return to refund all their monies. This is this letter I've just mentioned here, dated 18th of November 2024. Because the truth of I said, look, the actually sat down and said, look, people at Tangaji have gone somewhere else and built a church. They have bought a car. They have done something just to have influence over the church. But the church was able to stand its moral background, was able to stand on the foundation. This is a Catholic church anyway. I said, no, enough is enough. We don't want this anymore. And wrote out this letter on the 18th of last month, instructing that whatever gifts have been given to priests, to bishops, to communities in the name of church by politicians should be returned. That's what should be done. Remember, Kenya is an English-speaking country. The bishops there are Anglo-Saxon, just like the ones in Ambazonia should be. And so they should stand on this morality and say no. But morality has no boundaries. That's why I mentioned Archbishop Cleda of Douala is Francophone. So if we let things happen, at Tanganji, the devil has no shame buying his way through. At Tanganji will do anything, provided that it will serve his ethnic needs. Getting support for the CPDM or an early illegal regime that is there, pays him cash, gives him security on earth. And so he will continue to do it. It doesn't matter that he's lost this case. He will try again. I've even given you the example where he has built a church, which is an act of corruption, and given it to a certain community in Yaoundé there, just to buy their support politically. And so those things will happen. They are illegal, first. They are immoral, second. And the church is the foundation of morality. If members of the church don't stand up to the morality of Christ, because what was Christ doing? All these Christian churches were dealing with Christian churches. Christ was just a moral person. He taught people on morality. He had nothing. He had only one dress to wear. That's why they had to divide even when he died. He had no house to live in. And so until we in the churches resist money in any form or shape, we have the better foundation called the church. And if the church is the moral fabric of the community, so it must be. Because our children must go with the morality we show them. Our society would live on the moral values that the children will form the society tomorrow. And so that is wrong, should be condemned. And if we can restrain Atanganji, and I hope it is possible, it can be resisted. Or any other politician acting in his name. If we can even resist the leadership of the church, if it goes corrupt, like some of these archdioceses, I've mentioned the one of Bamenda. Remember the killing of the Archbishop of Bafia, the Bishop of Bafia. Those things should be resisted. There's a consequence. Sometimes the consequence is that they will die, they will kill you. But better die for the truth than to survive on immorality and injustice. Back to you.
Here when you say it is up to the church to resist such actions from colonial surveys. Well, speaking of resistance, we see that the ongoing struggle for the liberation of Ambazonia continues to highlight the strength and, of course, resilience as well as strategic prowess of the Ambazonian State Army, the ASA, despite persistent attempts by the colonial government of La Republique to undermine Ambazonia's defense efforts, including using gullible traditional leaders as tools for destabilization and, in some cases, even religious leaders, the Ambazonian State Army remains resolute in its mission to protect the homeland, from uncovering treacherous plots to executing successful raids on colonial outposts. The Ambazonian State Army's actions have demonstrated its unwavering commitment to the revolution and the liberation of Ambazonia. In Ngoketunja County, on December 2nd, 2024, the Ambazonian State Army obtained a secret audio recording that revealed yet another betrayal by a colonial-sponsored traditional leader. Well, let's take a quick listen to this audio, even though it's in a dialect.
Si koko beto yen bonoma. Make chair president we chair nchafumbung we chair battery on my babun to morning. Ya jula me ya big kuna mato for going Piemo. Na yen ton fit and jam be kuna be tweak up near you and jam be kuna.
Ndonya.
For mama, na chairman duala, if you would have been new. Then second one, a tea in the castle, and a tea in the castle was on a project chairman. Fika minute chiheni. Then for you, huh? Nay, the thing she about the doctor do it. So, Mokala Prince and Kuna.
Well, that audio was over 21 minutes long, and it is a secret recording that the ASA got access to, where the fawn with the name Richard Muntong of Bamising, under the patronage of the colonial regime, was heard pledging to identify and suppress supporters of the Ambazonian cause recorded during a clandestine meeting in Tico on December 1st, 2024. The fund called on the Ambazonian State Army from Bamising to surrender their weapons and submit to his authority to drop and end the struggle. Well, in response, the Ambazonian National Self-Defense Council issued a stern warning to all traditional rulers collaborating with La Republique. ANSC chairperson stated emphatically that nobody is above the God-ordained revolution, and whoever stands in its way shall be swept away by the wheels. The Ambazonian State Army is trained to address any situation on the field, and there will be no mercy for the wicked. A word to the wise is sufficient. These are his words, quoting the ANSC chairperson. While this betrayal has not weakened the Ambazonian State Army resolve, this betrayal has not weakened the Ambazonian State Army resolve. Instead, it has galvanized Ambazonian fighters who remain vigilant against both external threats and internal sabotage. Well, we see that even with all of the threats, instead, what has happened? Taking a look at what has been happening instead with the Ambazonian State Army in all of Ambazonia since the Fawn's audio got out, we see that Ku local government area, just yesterday's December 2nd, the Ambazonian State Army's General Boy Naboy led a specialized squad on a daring early morning raid against La Republic forces stationed at the Oku Colonial Brigade. While the exact number of casualties remain unconfirmed, the operation successfully disrupted the colonial occupation's military activities in the area. Well, this action follows a similar show of force by the Ambazonian State Army units as well in Bui County, where plans for colonial-sponsored festivities from December 27th 2024 this year to January 4th of next year were cancelled after strong warnings from the Ambazonian State Army. Well, the planned events aimed at projecting a false image of normalcy to the international community were thwarted by the strategic resistance of Ambazonian forces. And in Mbeseha County as well, we see a string of tactical successes because on November 29, 2024, prior to all of the recent happenings with the Ambazonian State Army, they executed a bold attack on an illegal La Republic checkpoint at Ntabesi Junction, Mile 2 in Quain. The operation resulted in the death of one colonial police officer with another hospitalized. And videos from the scene capture the Ambazonian State Army fighters calmly dismantling the checkpoints and riding off on motorbikes, underscoring their precision and fearlessness. Well, this follows an earlier attack on November 27, 2024 in Mile 4, Mbeseha County, where the Ambazonian State Army forces eliminated another La Republique operative and harvested his weapon. General Viper of Air Force of Tadu and newsman of the town's Boy claimed responsibility for these successful operations, assuring the population of Mbeseha County that the region would be cleansed of all colonial forces similar to neighboring Bui County. Well, we see a little bit of rising challenges and resolute resistance. Well, we see that the Amazonian State Army has not been deterred by colonial attempts to infiltrate its rank through traditional leaders acting as puppets of the regime. We see recent provocations, including plans by colonial surrogates to gather traditional rulers in 2 weeks' time, to be exact, which have been met with unequivocal warnings from the Amazonian State Army and similar resistance from the Amazonian State Army forces in Fako County, particularly the Black Tar Unit, has sent a clear message to collaborators and their colonial sponsors. The Amazonian State Army continues to call on all colonial forces occupying Ambazonian territory to surrender their weapons to the nearest ASA base for safe passage out of the nation, since they have no stake in the war and nothing to gain from it. Furthermore, the ASA and Ambazonians call the ASA call on Ambazonian supporters of freedom and advocates of justice and independence to intensify their support for the liberation struggle. Despite the heavy militarization of Ambazonia by colonial forces, the Ambazonian State Army's firepower and resolve have only grown stronger. Well, as the fight for freedom, dignity, and independence intensifies, the Amazonian people and their brave army remain steadfast, united in their mission to reclaim their homeland from foreign occupation. The resilience of the Amazonian State Army stands as a testament to the unyielding spirit of the Ambazonian people. While the colonial regime's attempts to destabilize and suppress the revolution persist, the Ambazonian State Army's strategic operations and unwavering commitment to the cause continues to thwart such efforts. The fight for Ambazonia is far from over, but with each act of bravery and resistance, we see the dream of a free and sovereign Ambazonia becoming even more attainable. Just before we head on to the African scene, Barrister Mbeseha, from these particular security situation reports, what is of great concern for every Ambazonian at this point is the fact that we see these sellouts, as a lot of Ambazonians would rather call them, who would rather sacrifice, so to put, and send their brothers, Southern Cameroonians, to the slaughter instead of facing the reality on the ground, the fight for the sovereignty of Ambazonia being a genuine fight and a legal battle for self-determination. Instead of putting in their voice or standing with the truth and their brothers, they end up being the sellouts going for the deaths of their brothers. What is your take on these secret recording that was sent out?
Yes, thank you again for having me for this segment. See, there are a number of things that this segment carries. Let us deal with the leaked message from the phone of Bamising. It is leaked. So when he recorded that thing, he did not contemplate that it was going to get out. Now it is leaked. But who was he addressing? He was addressing his own people. To do what? To kill their own children who are fighting for the restoration of Ambazonia. Who's a father, a mother who will kill his or her own child because the child is fighting? I'm sure no. He, the phone sitting there, looks a young man. I guess he has a number of children, maybe including many wives. How many of his own children is he willing to go and kill to enforce his CPDM agenda? I'm sure he's going to kill no. So the fact that it has leaked shows that it has failed. But let's not forget, who is the father of Bamising? I don't know him. But where is Bamising? Unless I'm making a mistake, Bamising is not too far away from Bali Kumbat. They are apparently neighbors. They are all in Gokutinja. And if we think back, not too long ago, in the 1990s, there was a certain fund of Bali Kumbat. At the time they launched the SDF in Bamenda, the fund of Bali Kumbat said it will not happen here in Bali Kumbat. I'm CPDM. In fact, he even went to he became even an MP. And he killed people who belonged to the SDF. He killed people there. And what happened to him? He ended up dying. He died. And the SDF survived. So it is in the blood, in the DNA of those people. So those people to be CPDM. In fact, to marry, to sink with the ship, because that by the combat farm died. So this one is looking for his own exit to death. because there's no way that you can fight your own people. The children are yours. They are fighting for you. You cannot fight against them. And so that is a fair message. It's going nowhere. And to the ASAs spread all over there, from Balikumbat, from Bamising, from Gokutunje to Mbeseha to Fako, everywhere. The message is keep the fire. Don't be mistaken. This is 2024. The ASAs are no longer going to be, we are no longer 10 battalions. Now, maybe the number will be reduced to 2, 3, 4 battalions, and the job will be done. Because the success of the ASA, the military, is not dependent upon the numbers. It's dependent upon the tactical and surgical approaches. The few that we still have, they call themselves few, they are surgical enough, be it in Bamenda, be it in Dab, be it in Gokutunja, in Kambe, anywhere in Ambazonia, they are surgical enough to tell Yaoundé that enough is enough. All of us remember that, for example, in the whole world, Israel is one of the smallest countries in the world. One of the tiniest countries in the world, they are not up to 1 million. But they have an army of first class, a world-class army. And so that is what it has become. Our boys are surgical enough. They are tactically effective. And so they should not be discouraged by the fact that where they used to be 100, there might be only 50 or 40 left. Those 40 or 50 are going to do the job because they are more surgical, they are more malleable, they are more tactical. And so all these other diversions, if we were not a diversion, they should have declared victory long ago, knowing that our numbers, the numbers of the ASAs, has reduced from 10,000 to 5,000. Now, that's reduced, no doubt about that. But the victory, the success of a military, of an armed, trained people is not dependent upon their number. It depends upon their surgical and tactical ability to do things that 100 could not do. So that is the message. The fund is selling after the market, I'm sure. Not to now he can right now if you say it, he will escape from it. Because he did not contemplate the thing will be hurt. Now it is out for public consumption. He will run away from his own message. Because we've seen those things before and they've all failed. What happened in Batibo? What happened in Guza when they shot those 2 boys? There were just 2 boys killed. Many other people have been killed. But 2 boys were executed in the market square, at least with the intention of sending a message that they did something wrong. That killing of those 2 boys, just 2 in Guza market, has cost the ADF or their forces in Momo. They've cost the AGOF-C, partly a reason for which Choyaba is in detention. And so those things that they are doing don't mean anything. The message to our ASA is remain where you are, be surgical enough, be tactical enough, do what you are supposed to do, and all those things that the funds at Tanganji and others say are a pure diversion. So you do it until you get to go. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Barrister Mbeseha, for your wonderful contributions. It couldn't have been said any better, but that will be all on the National Report right now, and we'll be heading off to that news around Africa and across the globe.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. Well, on the African scene, we see as President Joe Biden's term nears its end, he visits Angola. His visit to Angola and renewed hope, renewed focus on Africa signals a late attempt to solidify the U.S. of Africa relations amidst criticism of delayed engagement. Well, this comes against the backdrop of competition with China over Africa's critical minerals, a strategic resource essential for modern technologies, Biden's administration has pursued partnership in trade, security, and humanitarian aid, but the recent push for infrastructure investment, including a proposed 800-mile railway upgrade, makes a shift in strategy resembling China's Belt and Road Initiative. While Biden emphasizes that Africa has been a priority for his presidency, the timing of his actions raises question about their long-term impact, especially as Donald Trump prepares to assume office. Well, the Biden's visit to Angola highlights Africa's growing significance in global geopolitics, is particularly in the competition for critical minerals. Angola, rich in resources, stands to benefit from potential U.S. investments in infrastructure and trade. The proposed railway upgrade and could improve connectivity and stimulate regional economies, fostering growth and development. However, these efforts may also deepen Africa's entanglement in US China rivalries, potentially pressuring African nations to choose sides in the global power struggle. But then, for other African countries, Biden's last minute initiative could inspire similar infrastructure projects and enhance US engagement. However, the delayed prioritization of Africa may leave some nations skeptical of Washington's commitment, particularly given the continent's history of being overlooked in U.S. foreign policy. The abrupt surge, though, in U.S. Africa engagement could also complicate Donald Trump's foreign policy agenda, because if Biden's administration finalizes agreement or commits to substantial investments, Trump may face the pressure to uphold these commitments or risk alienating African partners. Biden's actions may also set a precedent for deeper U.S. involvement in Africa, an approach that Trump could either continue or reject, depending on his administration's priorities. Now, Biden's decision to make bold international moves just weeks before leaving office raises questions about their intent and sustainability. Is this a genuine effort to strengthen the U.S. African ties, or a symbolic gesture to secure his administration's legacy, is the question. Furthermore, why focus on Africa now, after delays and criticisms of neglect earlier in his presidency? But these actions could leave African leaders and the global community questioning the consistency of U.S. foreign policy, particularly as power transitions to a new administration. While Biden's last-minute push in Africa could have positive implications for Angola and the continent at large, its timing and execution cast doubt on the strategic foresight behind these movements. As Trump prepares to take office as well, he inherits not only opportunities but also challenges, making Africa's role in U.S. foreign policy an issue to watch in the coming years. But with that, let's head into the rest of the news across the globe. Well, on the global scene, we take a look at the situation in Syria that has been escalating, with the United Nations Syria Commission of Inquiry warning that fighting has intensified along multiple front lines of the Syrian conflict. The region is gripped by fear of a large-scale war, with deep-seated deadly dynamics igniting new waves of hostilities. Recent clashes have been reported in northeast Syria, particularly around Deir Zor, between the Kurdish-led forces and other groups. The Commission's report highlights the urgent need for a peaceful resolution to the conflict, which has been ongoing for years. The situation remains volatile, with civilians caught in this crossfire. The international community is calling for restraint and a return to diplomatic efforts to resolve the conflict. Well, for Korea, Yoon Suk-yeol imposes martial law. A recent surge in violence between Israel and Hezbollah has raised concerns that the fragile ceasefire in Lebanon may collapse. On Monday night, Israeli airstrike in southern Lebanon killed 10 people, marking the largest wave of airstrikes since the 13th month, conflict ended last week. The Israeli military claimed it targeted Hezbollah fighters, launchers, and infrastructure, urging Lebanese authorities to prevent the group's hostile activities. However, Hezbollah had earlier fired 2 mortars at an Israeli army base in a disputed border area, citing repeated violations by Israel. This escalation of violence has sparked fears of a broader conflict. The situation as well is very volatile, with both sides accusing each other of aggression. The international community is closely watching the situation, urging restraint and a return to the ceasefire agreement. South Korea's president declaring the martial art law was when President Yoon Suk Yeol sent shockwaves across the nation with the surprise late-night TV address that happened on Tuesday, declaring martial law and accusing the main opposition party, the Democratic Party, of sympathizing with North Korea and engaging in anti-state activities. Yoon's bold move came in response to the opposition party's efforts to impeach top prosecutors and reject the government's budget proposal. The president condemned these actions as evident anti-state conduct intended to provoke insurrection and claimed they disrupted state operations and transformed the National Assembly into a hub of criminality. The declaration of martial law grants the military sweeping powers to suspend civil rights, impose curfews, and censor the media, while Yoon assured citizens that the government would take swift action to restore normalcy and minimize disruptions. The move has sparked widespread concerns about the future of South Korea's democracy and political stability. But with that, we've come to the end of Undaunted tonight, bringing into the news untold stories. But before we go, let's take a look at the recap. On Undaunted tonight, we brought to you Tamfu Richard's torture, La Republic human rights abuses, as well as La Republic imposing leadership in Ambazonian churches and tradition, as well as the Ambazonian State Army standing firm against colonial provocations and infiltration. And we see on the foreign scene Biden's last minute moves and their implications for Angola, Africa, and Trump. The United Nations Syria Commission of Inquiry also warning that fighting has intensified along multiple front lines of the Syrian conflict. And that was it for tonight's Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. We leave you with ABC Amba TV images. Good night and God bless you.